This is Kizaru, but no one cares about that because he is made out of light and you are not, which makes him one of the most impossible opponents to face in all of One Piece, and Kizaru occupies a position as one of the most prolific figures in the fictional pirate rogues gallery. How prolific, you ask, not realizing that you're speaking to a video that can't talk back to you? Well, we're gonna find out. Because we are on a mission to rank every major antagonist in the most comprehensive and exhaustive way possible, video by video, this time featuring a man whose penis is canonically made out of light, Kizaru. Those were Oda's words, not mine, by the way. I didn't want to know. Oda he's very loud with these things. I'm very excited about this video though. In fact, I've been eagerly anticipating the end of Egghead Island just so we could make this. Because Kizaru is my favorite Marine Admiral, and his introduction, it is incredibly understated. After Luffy punches St. Charles, we cut to the Holy Land of Marijois, where what we see is a middle-aged man getting up from his comfy chair and claiming that he'll be back right away. Usually Oda elects to introduce villains with a sort of intimidating silhouette, one that paints them as an immediate big bad threat that we need to be concerned with, and one that often goes on to be subverted by their actual design. You see the villain and it's like, oh, okay, I guess they're not actually that scary, but Kizaru, ooh, he's the opposite. Oda introduces him looking not so scary, and he turns out to be one of the most terrifyingly unstoppable antagonists we've ever encountered. The really scary thing about Kizaru is that Oda didn't feel the need to paint him as intimidating. Kizaru didn't need any artistic assistance to tell us how to feel about him. And a lot of the credit for this mainly goes to the introduction of Aokiji on Long Ring Longland, who already established the threat level of a Marine Admiral. So in that way, Kizaru didn't need any help. Just hearing his name was enough for readers and watchers to clench their very real buttholes in very fictional fear. But the most initially striking thing about Kizaru isn't any of the fear, it's not the power, it is his playfulness. He has a series of gags immediately attached to him, one of which is that he can never work his Denden Mushi no matter how many times he's been told. It's like trying to show my mother how to use any Bluetooth device. It's impossible. She just doesn't get it, and I've run out of ways to try and teach her. But Kizaru, he is so powerful that this lack of comprehension, it is irrelevant. Despite being able to move at what is effectively the speed of light, Kizaru is also incredibly slow and carefree. He runs on his own schedule, and in the anime in particular, his voice sounds rather sarcastic and can be quite demeaning depending on who he's talking to, which can even extend to world-class figures like Ben Beckman. During the Paramount War, when Beckman threatened Kizaru, this gave us the classic whoa whoa Ben Beckman line, which was just Kizaru messing around because he immediately and easily escaped. For the vast majority of One Piece, there has been nothing that even comes close to making Kizaru worry. There was even that one time where he offered to go to Wano when the Marines discovered that Big Mom was on her way there, and thus Kizaru is essentially offering to put himself in a position to be facing both Big Mom and Kaido. There is no person in this world who willingly volunteers to fight two Emperors of the Sea at once. No one except for this guy. And he does it all with a smile. Kizaru, he's always smiling. He's the epitome of live, laugh, love. And just as empty as that tired motivational phrase, as we will soon see. Back to Sabadi though. To Kizaru, this mission of punishing the worst generations that punched the dude. It's about on the same level as picking up some milk from the shops. And we see why, as one casual kick can cause more destruction than any single attack we'd seen in the series to this point. To the Straw Hats at this stage, Kizaru is effectively a god. He descended from the heavens of the Holy Land. He controls light. He moves at what is inaccurately referred to, but is effectively light speed. And he can regenerate from what little damage anyone is actually capable of inflicting on him. There's also a very interesting metric used during this arc that relates to Kizaru, which is when Shaki states that Silver's Rayleigh is about 100 times stronger than the supernovas on the archipelago. At the time, this sounds like an exaggeration, but it turns out to be a scarily accurate measurement, and it puts Kizaru into some pretty clear perspective. Because it took Silver's Rayleigh to stop him, and not comfortably either. In fact, Kizaru seemed quite confident in his chances against Rayleigh, meaning that Kizaru is at least 100 times stronger than Luffy at this stage. And that number is not lost on Luffy. His goal after meeting Kizaru is to become that 100 times stronger. And he will drop that specific number much later on in the series. But Kizaru's role as main antagonist of the Sabadi arc is one of a horror movie villain. You cannot fight him, you can only run and hope not to be his next victim as he decimates every figure unfortunate enough to be caught in his path. And while this isn't immediately apparent, he does have an incredibly imposing physical presence as well. I'd say the first time that we really feel this is when we see Kizaru standing near Basil Hawkins. He is a colossal human and visually elevated to the godlike status that matches his power. And he is arguably one of, if not the single most impactful main antagonist protagonist in One Piece. Because Kizaru is responsible for the destruction of the Straw Hat Pirates. He is the one and only challenge that has caused this crew to crumble, resulting in the iconic speech of the series narrator. Grove 12, Sabri Archipelago, the Grand Line. That day, the Straw Hat Pirates led by Captain Monkey D. Luffy were eradicated. Kizaru changed the course of the entire series. The Straw Hats as we knew them ceased to exist after encountering him. We were now 500 chapters into this journey, and all of a sudden we were reading a completely different story, following Luffy alone and into the unknown. So when it comes to the arc that he was put in charge of, Kizaru did a better job than any other villain in every area we could have asked for. In fact, there's only 2 other antagonists in the series that have managed to scar Luffy with the depth that Kizaru managed to inflict. And they would be Blackbeard and Sakazuki, whose combination of actions led to the death of Ace. But so far, Kizaru is the perfect villain, full marks. But there's a lot more to Kizaru that we've mined in the 15 years since this event. As a Marine Admiral, Kizaru of course has his own personal philosophy of justice, which is unclear justice. A philosophy so vague yet so clearly stated, as Kizaru has it written in large characters behind him in his office. Unclear justice is extremely difficult to define, and that's on purpose. It's because of Kizaru's own refusal to do so. According to Kizaru's Viviacard databook entry, he elected to adopt unclear justice so that he doesn't have to particularly think or even care about what he does. Kizaru's justice is unclear because he himself has no vision of justice, which is quite sad because it also means that he has no personal hopes and dreams for the future. Kizaru has even referred to himself as being a cog in the machine, and his Viviacard entry states that he prefers to follow orders rather than issue them, which is very awkward for someone in one of the highest positions of leadership that one could have in this world. One of the best metaphors I've ever heard for Kizaru is a man stuck in middle management. Someone who has given decades and decades of his life to a company that has slowly sucked away any and all ambition, and has left him as a functional husk. Kizaru is a man with no dreams, and that's why he stands so powerfully as one of Luffy's greatest foes. Luffy, he's all about dreams, and Kizaru, he's like a dream black hole. One that lulls you into a false sense of security by showing you a shiny beacon of light to follow. However, he exists to end the dreams of others and substitute absolutely nothing in their place. Even Blackbeard, a man literally made of darkness who also literally may or may not be able to sleep, has more dreams than Kizaru. And as a result of this, Kizaru is one of the only extremely high-level figures in the series who does not have Conqueror's Haki for obvious reasons, which is both a monumental achievement, making it that far without such a key ability, but also a perfect metaphor for his existence. Kizaru puts in all of the work, but he's not building anything for himself. He has no will that he's exerting. Kizaru works just as hard as all of the greatest conquerors on this planet, but unlike them, he has nothing to show for it. However, Kizaru does greatly admire those who do have dreams and ideals. He may not necessarily understand why they fight and go to the extremes they do, but he does respect it. And a fantastic example of this is when Kizaru is ordered to infiltrate the Laba phase by Saint Saturn. However, Kizaru refused to simply do that because it would ignore Sentomaru, a man who, in Kizaru's own words, was making a quote principled stand. So Kizaru took a detour to honor Sentomaru's beliefs before continuing his mission. And while it is rare, Kizaru has also formed some very real friendships. Other than a single image we have of Kizaru as a child, the oldest known sighting of this man was when he met Dr. Vegapunk, who would go on to become Kizaru's oldest and potentially even only friend. In fact, we have yet to meet another character who would dare designate themselves in Kizaru's social circle like that. The only other bond we've seen to this point is with Sakazuki, and that's more of a Yakuza colleague dynamic. They refer to each other as brothers, but it's a very formal brother. And Kizaru went on to play a major role in many of Vegapunk's projects, including the development of the Pacifista laser tech, building Egghead Island himself, and he was even put in charge of supervising Vegapunk during Kuma's procedure, which gave us the one and only moment of genuine happiness we've ever seen from Kizaru, which is the now iconic pizza party, where even Kizaru is performing the Nika dance taught to him by Bartholomew Kuma, which is extremely ironic because this is a dance of hope for the future. It's performed by those who see a vision for the dawn of the world, which accurately defines every other character at this party, but not him. And perhaps in this very moment, Kizaru did have that vision. However, whatever hope and clarity was briefly present here was swiftly removed with the erasure of Bartholomew Kuma. And if anything, after this moment, Kizaru doubled down on his cog in the machine model. He'd experienced that sliver sliver of hope, and he'd experience how that hope was immediately erased. And he was left even more empty than before, because now he knows what he's missing. And this perspective of justice is on full display during the Paramount War. Kizaru was present for a tremendous amount of the Marineford arc, but despite that, there's not a whole lot to say about him or his actions. He does have a lot of fantastically hype action moments. He gets to kick a bird, and that's pretty cool. But this arc is all about Kizaru being the best cog he can. He doesn't express any desires or emotions during the long battle, and it actually shows us one of the greatest strengths of Unclear Justice. Because most of the fighters on this battlefield had an emotional attachment or conflict to deal with in some way, but Kizaru's Unclear Justice allowed him to just do his job and function as one of the most effective soldiers he could have been. There was no hesitation, only action. And in such a complicated mess of an event, I do find it interesting that the only character who had true clarity during the war was the man who practices deliberately unclear justice. There were over 100,000 Marines present at this conflict, and afterwards the vast majority had some sort of trauma or learning experience, but Kizaru came away from the most impactful pre-time skip event as if it was any other day at the office. So there's definite advantages to remaining as unfeeling as possible, and this is probably how Kizaru has risen so high within the Marines. He doesn't have the ambition to claim an admiral position, but he also isn't plagued by the same questions and hesitations of morality that every other recruit is. And in a time of crisis, that lack of hesitation can make all the difference. And it's at this point that I should also mention Kizaru's special appearances in the One Piece franchise. I affectionately refer to Kizaru as the movie Admiral because he takes a very active role in many of the modern One Piece films, and his abilities tend to get used to showcase animation. Kizaru's light powers are very aesthetically compelling to watch, so the films like to take full advantage of that, and Kizaru maintains his mystique throughout these films, as these appearances only add to his legend. Kizaru is the one who kills Zephyr at the end of Film Z. Kizaru leading a Buster Call was the event that caused everyone to flee Delta Island in One Piece Stampede, and in One Piece Film Red, it took Shanks, red-haired Shanks, Emperor of the Sea, just to quell the threat of Kizaru. Movie Kizaru definitely represents that legendary godlike Kizaru, and does not at all present him as the man he actually is. We'd need to wait until Egghead Island to really see that part of him on full display. Kizaru served as a secondary antagonist during the Egghead Island arc, where he is flung into an immediate rematch with Luffy, which starts with our rubber captain stating, compared to 2 years ago, we're 100 times stronger now, which is a reference to the Shaki power scaling of Ray Lee that we mentioned earlier. So now Luffy is declaring that he is ready to fight on Kizaru's previously unattainable level. And something that has to be taken into account in this specific situation is the real-world time gap between Sabaody and Egghead Island. Luffy first encountered Kizaru in chapter 511, which was published in August 2008, and Luffy would not be in a position to properly take on Kizaru until chapter 1091, published in September 2023. That's almost exactly 15 years, and that's why Luffy's dominance against Kizaru in this Egghead fight feels so earned. In most shonen series, you could have a character literally 100 times stronger than the protagonist rock up and have them defeated by the very next arc or even in the same arc, which often feels very cheap and unearned. But we watch Luffy struggle and develop over 15 years of real time to earn the power to fight on and even beyond Kizaru's level. And thematically, there's also an exploration of light happening here. Luffy, the sun god, fighting with his dawn attacks versus Kizaru fighting with his manufactured light attacks. And Luffy's light proves to be superior. And also the feeling of fighting and struggling against a god has been flipped. On Egghead Island, Luffy is the one who feels unstoppable. And because he can now transform into a giant, he also now outscales Kizaru physically. But it wasn't just Luffy either, because Kizaru was also dwarfed by the presence of Saint Saturn as well as the other Elder Stars eventually. And there came a point during Egghead Island where I'd forgotten that Kizaru was even in it, because we had moved so far beyond anything he could possibly deal with. He ended this arc feeling very mortal, very vulnerable. He ended this arc feeling the same way to me as the worst generation members felt against him on Sabaody. Especially because Kizaru's end here, it's less than spectacular. Kizaru gets squished into a pancake, spun like pizza dough, and tossed off the island like an empty bottle into the ocean. Not very environmentally conscious of Monkey D. Luffy, but I guess he had some shorter term worries at the time. It was such a brilliant flip of perspective, especially because Luffy using Gear 5th is always smiling, like how Kizaru was always smiling. So we got to see Luffy in Kizaru's playground, and now we are seeing Kizaru in Luffy's playground. However, the main meat for Kizaru on Egghead Island was the mission to kill his oldest friend, Dr. Vegapunk, and like Marineford, this is what Unclear Justice is designed to protect Kizaru from. Most people would need to take a bit of a moment before signing lining up to kill their best friend, not this man though, because Unclear Justice is designed to keep Kizaru from dwelling on those thoughts, and he does carry out his mission by being the person to deliver that killing blow to Vegapunk. However, what happens next is rather appropriately unclear. At the end of Egghead Island, Kizaru was left broken. He spent the entire climax of this arc on the floor of a battleship, and his final appearance during Egghead was bursting into tears thinking about what he just had to do. It would seem that Unclear Justice had failed him, but I would argue otherwise. In this case, Unclear Justice actually led to the most just outcome. Kizaru killing his friend is what triggered Vegapunk's message to be played across the world, which has now changed the course of history for the better and will lead to the downfall of the world government. In a very convoluted and very unclear way, Kizaru did exactly what Vegapunk needed him to do, and acting as this perfect cog in the machine for once actually resulted in the just outcome. Now, as for where Kizaru goes from here, right now, I feel like the only way he could be further explored would be to give him a dream or inherited will as a result of this experience. Honestly though, I feel pretty satisfied with him. Not every antagonist needs that full circle redemption, and I think the ideas that Kizaru was designed to explore were implemented pretty much perfectly. I definitely wouldn't say no to more of him in the future, but I do also think this is a more than acceptable place for his character to just take a rest. Although there definitely will be more because we cannot ignore a Marine Admiral. So we'll see, but right now, I don't see any reason not to award Kizaru a coveted S tier. He's not your typical One Piece villain, and he didn't have the memorable struggles provided by a Lucia, Crocodile, or Adolf Flamingo, but at the same time, he was far more impactful than any of them, and carried out his own multi-arc purpose flawlessly. He didn't tank his follow-up like Jack, he didn't vanish from the story like Magellan, and he wasn't as narratively risky as Hody Jones. Kizaru just got the job done to as high of a standard as he could, as always, and I don't think there's anything more that I could have asked for. But you let me know in the comments which villain you'd like to see ranked next.